In Zimbabwe, power has never simply been about winning an election. It is a story shaped by a liberation struggle, by the promises of independence, by the trauma of economic collapse, and of course, by the shadow of a long presidency that once seemed immovable. Today, that story has taken a new turn, one that asks the familiar question, how long should a leader stay in power? In late 2025, Zimbabwe's ruling party, ZANU-PF, signaled its intention to extend President Emmerson Mnangagwa's term by 2 years.
Resolved that his term of office as President of the Republic of Zimbabwe be extended beyond 2028 to 2030.
This development was reported by outlets such as Al Jazeera and AP News as a significant political moment, raising both national and regional eyebrows. And if you understand the history of Zimbabwe, then you will know that no constitutional amendment happens in a vacuum. It is always linked to something deeper, be it liberation legitimacy, party factionalism, and the long struggle between democratic expectations and political survival. Zimbabwe's political landscape changed dramatically in 2017 when Robert Mugabe, after 37 years in power, was removed in what the military insisted was not a coup. But everyone understood what had happened. The National Army, through the leadership of General Constantino Chiwenga, had intervened to reposition the state. Emmerson Mnangagwa, who had been Mugabe's longtime lieutenant, took over the presidency. He promised a new dispensation, a cleaner government, and a break from Mugabe's era of isolation and coercion. But politics in Zimbabwe is never that simple. The same structures that elevated Mnangagwa, the war veterans, the party machinery, the military networks, also began shaping the limits of his power. By 2023, Mnangagwa had won what observers described as a contested election. Opposition groups challenged his credibility, while regional observers acknowledged irregularities. But still, the president remained firmly in control. By 2025, however, a new question had emerged. What happens when Mnangagwa's final constitutional term comes to an end? Zimbabwe's 2013 constitution is clear. A president may serve 2 5-year terms, and Mnangagwa's second term is due to end in 2028. However, ZANU-PF began exploring a constitutional amendment that would align the electoral calendar and extend his term by 2 additional years, making it end in 2030. The internal language used by party officials is quite interesting. This is not an extension of power, they claim, but rather an administrative harmonization. But everyone knows what this means. In Zimbabwe, constitutional changes have always been political decisions wearing legal clothes. The debate has raised concerns from civil society groups and international observers who question whether the amendment would entrench executive power or simply reflect political maneuvering within ZANU-PF. To fully understand why the 2030 extension matters, we have to understand the invisible battlefield inside of ZANU-PF. Zimbabwe's ruling party is less of a unified movement and more of a constellation of liberation-era networks, some loyal to Mnangagwa and others to his deputy, Vice President Constantino Chiwenga. Chiwenga, the former army commander who oversaw the 2017 military intervention, is widely viewed as a future presidential aspirant. His faction within the party includes the war veterans, elements of the military elite, and those who see Mnangagwa as a transitional figure rather than a long-term leader. The proposed extension to 2030 complicates that succession timeline. For Chiwenga's allies, it suggests a delay to his expected rise. But for Mnangagwa's supporters, it offers stability and continuity. As for the rest of Zimbabwe, it reopens old anxieties. In many ways, the 2030 proposal can be interpreted not merely as constitutional housekeeping, but as an effort by Mnangagwa's circle to secure more time, politically, economically, and strategically in a system where timing is everything. You see, ZANU-PF's power is built on a specific narrative, that the party is not merely a political organization but the custodian of liberation. This identity has shaped every election, every political crisis, and every question of succession. Since 1980, leadership transitions inside ZANU-PF have been resolved not by elections alone, but by the authority of the liberation generation, the war veterans, the commanders, and the early nationalists who fought against Rhodesia. But today, that generation is aging. The Liberation War ended nearly half a century ago. Many key figures have passed away, retired, or simply lost influence. The party is increasingly torn between an older guard seeking continuity and a younger wing demanding renewal. Mnangagwa belongs firmly to the old guard, and so does Chiwenga. This means that Zimbabwe faces a delicate moment. The question of 2030 is not only about one man's presidency. It is about how long the liberation generation can hold on to the steering wheel of the state. The proposed extension has triggered mixed reactions across Zimbabwe. Some see it as an unnecessary manipulation of the constitution, while others view it as a predictable step in a political system that has long centered around executive authority. Civil society groups have raised concerns about democratic backsliding. Opposition leaders have framed it as a sign that ZANU-PF intends to cling to power regardless of public sentiment. But for many ordinary Zimbabweans, the debate feels distant, overshadowed by daily economic pressures, inflation, unemployment, and the long struggle for household survival. Internationally, the move has attracted attention from regional blocs and global observers. Zimbabwe's recent efforts to re-engage with Western governments could be complicated if the constitutional process is seen as undermining democratic norms. But so far, the state's position remains consistent. This is internal political housekeeping and not a power grab. In Zimbabwe's long political history, however, very few people believe constitutional amendments are ever neutral. If Zimbabwe does indeed extend the president's term to 2030, it will not be alone in Africa. In recent years, several African countries, including Rwanda, Uganda, Côte d'Ivoire, and the Republic of Congo, have revised constitutions to allow leaders to extend their rule. Some argue this creates stability, but others argue it weakens institutions, consolidates personal rule, and erodes democratic legitimacy. Zimbabwe sits uneasily within this trend. It has strong liberation-era institutions, a history of dominant party politics, and a political culture shaped by long-term leaders. At the time of this recording, ZANU-PF is still refining the proposal. It will require a 2/3 majority in parliament, something the party already holds, and a legal process that could stretch across 2026. If it does pass, Mnangagwa would remain president until 2030. What happens after that becomes a question of political strategy. Does Mnangagwa retire, paving the way for a successor? Does the party elevate a compromise candidate? Does the Chiwenga faction regroup for a 2030 challenge? Or does this extension simply buy more time for political recalibration? In Zimbabwe, political moves often appear administrative until their deeper meaning becomes clear. This extension could stabilize the party or fracture it further. It could reassure the elites or heighten succession anxiety. It could even strengthen Mnangagwa or merely postpone an inevitable power struggle.